Elections are important for every democracy, but they don't necessarily define democracy. It is the connections between citizens, the state, and the character of governance, the level of accountability, the extent of participation that shapes democracy. It is not enough to actually have the electoral laws. And I think our crisis, the crisis of our election in the country, is not the lack of the right electoral laws. So each time you have a new electoral law, for me, that law, as good as that law may be, it works for only one election season. And immediately after elections, this politician perfects way of undermining it. Parties, politicians who cannot even manage their own parties. They can't run a credible internal democratic process within their own parties. And the same people are talking about elections or credible elections, and we expect such people to even make laws or legislations that will deepen the credibility of our elections. We have redefined our democracy, unfortunately, to mean elections.
This podcast is brought to you by the Volume Pod in association with the Cable NG, Al Barka Radio, 97.5 FM, and Diazu Development.
Many thanks for keeping up with us on Volume with FemiDlive. Grateful. And like we already know, we are at a special event for today, which is the event held by Parent Advocacy and Advancement Center in Africa, PAACA. And yes, the National Conference on Future of Democracy in Nigeria. And yes, we're looking at the theme sustaining democratic growth as we have it. My guest is Dr. Hussaini Abdul. He's here with me at this time. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you. Thanks for having
me. He's
me.
also the chairman of this very occasion.
Yes.
We're glad you joined in to look at this. Why is this important to Nigeria now? I mean, election year is about less than 16 months away, but why is this conversation very important that we have it now?
I think it's a very important conversation because we have redefined our democracy, unfortunately, to mean elections. And each time we talk democracy, the quickest thing that comes to mind is about elections. But immediately after elections, we lose every conversations. Issues of accountability, representation, strategic delivery that democracy is supposed to provide hardly comes to mind. So I think this conversation is necessary to begin to look at issues beyond elections. And elections are important for every democracy, but they don't necessarily define democracy. It is the connections between citizens, the state, and the character of governance, the level of accountability, the extent of participation that shapes democracy. And I think conversation like this is what we actually help in also defining the directions of our elections. If we don't have this kind of conversations before the elections, as elections creeps in, it will just amount to vote grabbing, people struggling to win vote, than to discuss substantive issues that borders on democracy.
And one of the things going on across the country right now is issues around the electoral reform, the law around it. Some are looking at changing the date of which election would hold. If you bring it forward, one-day voting. There are many theatrics that is going into that. What do you think is one of the most prominent issues that they should see through as part of that electoral reform, that is being talked about at this time?
Yeah, it's always good to reform, but on our elections, and I speak as someone who has been working on elections for several years, but it is not enough to actually have the electoral laws. And I think our crisis, the crisis of our election in the country, is not the lack of the right electoral laws. I am not saying what we have is perfect, but it's a very strong missing link in our election management or governing process. And that missing link actually has to do with the character of our politicians and the values they espouse. We have politicians whose values are terribly inimical to our democracy. You have people who are running our democracy, but they don't believe in democracy. Their relationship with democracy is only when it serves their interest. When it fails to serve their interest, then democracy becomes an anathema. They don't want to touch it. So each time you have a new electoral law, for me, that law, as good as that law may be, it works for only one election season. And immediately after elections, this politician perfects way of undermining it. The perfect ways of undermining it because they don't believe in it. They only use it, they manipulate it, they engage it to serve their interests. So even as we work on the new electoral laws, I am not against it. But what I call on citizens to do is to look beyond the laws, to look at the values that our politicians espouse. These are parties, politicians who cannot even manage their own parties. They can't run a credible internal democratic process within their own parties. And the same people are talking about elections or credible elections, and we expect such people to even make laws or legislations that will deepen the credibility of our elections. So the kind of conversation we should be having is about the values that our politicians espouse, values of accountability, values of participation, values of actually holding the system to account. Until we are able to get that, electoral laws will only serve us briefly or albeit annually. So it means every new elections season will require a new electoral law, and that shouldn't be the case.
When we think about, and this is my last question on this, Anambra elections was just concluded, but there was a lot of vote buying, of voter inducement that did go on, and speeches around that from the sitting governor to other candidates. And what was very complex about it was that at a time when Nigeria seems to be almost winning the war against vote buying, there is also that clear-cut, nobody will do anything to anybody if you provide a means of inducement. What's your thoughts on that? The boldness in which politicians are now making declarations of what they can or cannot do.
My sense is that I don't think we are at any time or any point winning the war against vote buying. I actually think that in the last 20 years, what we are seeing is the escalation in that vote buying. The mechanisms for vote buying may change, but we have never been closer to winning the war against vote buying. The dynamics has shifted. The way it is done had changed over the years, and now we're seeing it more publicly, particularly closer to polling units or voting centers. We see monies being shared, which is completely different from what we used to have. And that tells you the level of impunity in the country, that you can just do anything and get away with it. In the past, you still find a way of hiding it. In the past, you still find a way of giving it out without necessarily displaying it. But now we display it. And there are so many things that has to do with it. One, for me, is the depth of poverty and exclusion in the country. Second is the disconnect between politicians and the voters. And the third one for me is the growing impunity at the highest level. So on the first one, when people are so excluded, when poverty deepens, people look for spaces to take advantage. They look for opportunities. And elections become an opportunity to extract. Particularly in the context of corruption, where electorate actually believe that even when we elect you, you are going there to serve yourself. Let me get whatever I can get before the election, because I know after this process, I will not see you again. And therefore, they just want to take it. And they don't care how small it is, whether it is 1,000, it's 1,200, or it is 10,000. They just want to get something out of it. They feel that coming out to vote is not even worth it. And so for me to leave my house to come to vote for you, then you must induce me. You must give me something to encourage me to do it. Otherwise, I'm not coming out. That's the first one. The second instance of it is the fact that we can do it and nothing will happen. That's the area of impunity, that the politicians do it on and on again and nothing will happen. even where symbolic arrests are made in some locations, the politicians still go out or they still go back to bail those people and kill probably the prosecution process. So no one has been effectively prosecuted on the basis of facilitating vote buying or not. And I think for me, the most telling about this issue is how politicians, the disconnect that has emerged. Citizens have lost significant trust in the process. They've lost trust in their leaders, and therefore they get into transactional relationship. That look, for me, I don't care about you. Just give me something. It's a transaction. You give me, I go out. You don't give me, fine, I stay at home and go and sort out yourself. So it's a crisis of our politics, and it's important to discuss it and deal with it. And that's why conversation of this nature remains very important.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hussaini Abdul, for your time. Grateful to you that you shared such an insight with us today. Thank you so much for
Thanks
coming
for
on.
having me. Thank
Yes,
you.
sir.